allowing us the time to present our argument today and for considering our appeal. The focus of, I'm Claudia Newman again, I represent the appellants in this matter, and the focus of our appeal is pretty straightforward. It's the central issue presented in our case is that the sections 25.11.050, 060, and 070 of Ordinance 126821 are inconsistent with 4 different comprehensive plan policies. And those are in our brief. The first one is EN 1.2, which is strive to increase citywide tree canopy to 30% by 2037 and to 40% over time. The second is EN 1.7, promote the care and retention of trees and groups of trees that enhance Seattle's historical, cultural, recreational, environmental, and aesthetic character. And I want to emphasize the word retention in that policy. The third is GS 3.8, which is encourage the preservation and expansion of the tree canopy throughout the city for the aesthetic, health, and environmental benefits trees provide, considering first the residential and mixed-use areas with the least tree canopy in order to more equitably distribute the benefits to residents. And finally, BL-P26, develop regulations, incentives, and educational materials to minimize lot clearing and ensure creative site designs that retain mature trees. Now, the question here is not whether the city has strived to meet canopy goals through other programs or other code provisions. We're very focused on these 3 code provisions and whether they're inconsistent with the code. And to demonstrate this concept, I just want to use a comparison. We imagine a comp plan policy that says that developers shall protect class 1 and class 2 wetlands, for example. Pretend there's a policy that says that. And then there's a regulation adopted in a critical areas code that says developers may develop within class 1 and 2 wetlands if necessary for their development. That regulation is pretty clearly inconsistent with the policy, the example policy I just had. And it's not relevant. The extent that the city may be protecting class 1 or class 2 wetlands through other programs or other code provisions is not relevant to the narrow question of whether these specific regulation provisions are inconsistent with the comp plan. And I mention that because the city spends, I would say, maybe 75%, that's not an exact number, but most of its argument is about other programs and other code provisions. They don't really focus on the 3 code provisions that we are focused on. It's like a distraction from the issue. And also another point, to the city's argument that they've devoted a serious effort and energy towards striving to increase tree canopy. There's a big difference between plans and policies and regulations. And I want to point out the city has indeed devoted a lot of energy and effort in developing plans and policies about tree retention. They have their urban forest management plan, they have their comprehensive plan, and other resolutions and statements throughout the record about this goal of achieving increased tree canopy throughout the city. The problem is when the rubber hits the road and they adopt these regulations are what preserve trees. Regulations preserve trees. Plans and policies don't preserve trees. And the problem with this ordinance and these specific 3 provisions is that they are inconsistent with that goal of increasing tree canopy. And that actually makes it all the more problematic considering all the effort that's gone into the planning and the policy making, that this regulation basically tosses it all aside and does not protect trees. So I want to focus on, this is where I might start sharing a screen pretty soon, just as a heads up. What I would like to do is walk you through a few examples and point to, I want to compare the old code tree protection code and the new code, the new ordinance that we're challenging, and show all of you how different the new code is and how much less protective it is of trees. And as a reminder, the tree canopy in the city of Seattle has been decreasing under the old code. The old code, it's established in the record, was not protective enough of trees to meet the tree canopy goals. And the whole aim here, did you want to?
I would yes, it seems like you would be able to share your screen.
Thank you.
And if you have trouble, just let us know. We can pull up the document.
Okay, much appreciated.
Okay.
The old code, the whole focus of doing this as the outline, the timeline of public process that the city has provided you as an illustrative exhibit, is to increase regulatory protections of trees. And that was the goal here, and that goal was clearly not met. So what I will do is I'm going to compare the old code to the new code in specifics, and then I have a couple illustrative exhibits that show examples of how the application of the new code on the ground changes the situation on all the lots. So I will start with, get myself oriented here. Okay, so this is the new code, and let me get the old code. Okay. On this page, what I have open for you is the code that was in existence before the ordinance that we're challenging was adopted. And the code is chapter 25.11. Just for the record, this is RIN 47. And this old code is at RIN 407. And I want to start with this idea that I mentioned in the brief, that the new code has expanded significantly the types of development, the types of project permits, the character of development that fits into the exception that allows removal of trees. In other words, this code prohibited tree removal or topping, as you can see at 2511.040. It said tree removal or topping is prohibited, except when tree removal is required for the construction of a new structure, retaining wall, rockery, or other similar improvement that is approved as part of a building or grading permit. So that's the key language right there, building or grading permit. So it's limited. You can't do it for subdivision. You can't do it for a boundary lot line adjustment. You can't do it for a unit lot split. There's all sorts of different, types of proposals that didn't fit in here. You could not remove trees associated with those. And then just for the record, this language here, 2511, 060, 070, and 080, limited with certain standards when trees could be removed with a building or grading permit. So that, they say you can remove trees when blah, blah, blah. And I'll get into that in a minute. But right now I just want to focus on this language right here. So now under the new code, let's see if I can. My close window block is blocked by the, let me try something.
You may need to unshare and reshare.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That can
but I'm not even getting the window that's allowing me to unshare. Like I'm blocked out of all. There we go. Thank you.
There.
Did someone do that for me? Thank you. Okay. So you just locked, so now I'm resharing. is what I'm understanding. Okay. Let me get this smaller so I can not have that happen again. Okay. All right, so now I've got the new code open, and this is the new provision 25 point. This is under the ordinance that we're challenging. It says the removal or topping of the following trees is prohibited, except as provided in 020, which is not an issue in this case, and perform blah, blah, blah. And then here's when it's, the exceptions are. And notice that it just says development now. So right here under 3, it says when development is proposed in all of these different zones, it says tier 2 trees may not be removed except as permitted under, and then there's the qualifications here. So development, they've gone from building or grading permits to development. And the reason that matters, I'll give you an exhibit. Here's just a project that is in Broadview, the Broadview neighborhood. Right here, this is a piece of property that is undeveloped. This is the current situation on the property, and these are all trees. And just to give you, like right here where I'm pointing, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So where I'm pointing, those are very old, tall cedar trees. And I'll just to give you a feel for what it looks like, you see these pictures here. And they cannot be removed under the old code because, well, I'm sorry, I should explain, there's a subdivision proposal happening. And the developer wants to build, this is where those old cedars were, wants to put its road in right there. And under the old code, when they're subdividing their property, they cannot remove trees because they can only remove trees with a building or grading permit. Under the new code, if they want to put their road there, that's development, and they can move. This is allowed under the new code. So all these trees will come down under the new code, and that's just an example of the problem. Now, moving on to another issue. Another problem with the new code, let's go, now when I was describing 040, I pointed to, it said that tree removal is prohibited except as provided in sections 060, 070, and 080. So we go to 060, and this talks about tree protection on single family zones, which are now neighborhood residential zones. And the SDCI, the planning department, which is the director here, may permit a tree to be removed only if the maximum lot coverage permitted on the site cannot be achieved without extending into the tree protection area. So that was the standard. They would say, you can remove a tree if you can't get your maximum lot coverage. And just for the record, in the city of Seattle, the maximum lot coverage in the single family zone, this isn't necessarily critical to this argument, but my understanding is that it's 35% for lots that are above 5,000 square feet. And for lots that are below 5,000 square feet, it's 1,000 square feet plus 15% of the lot size. So just to give you an idea of what maximum lot coverage is. So then under the new code, we see that tier trees may not be removed except as permitted under 070. So we move to 070 for the new standard. And this is neighborhood residential zones. So tier trees may be removed only if, so we have this, which is maximum lot coverage, looks similar to the previous one, this, and now they've added a new provision, or, this is new, tree removal, so they can be removed if tree removal is necessary for the construction of all of any improvements associated with development. So basically, you can remove a tree anytime it's necessary. That's all you have to show. So you could basically build a tiny little house for your cat on your lot and remove a tree, or you could put in a pedestrian path of stones, pedestrian access, so just put down a stone walkway and remove a tree. That's the whole standard right there. Tier 2 trees may be removed if it's necessary. So to give you an example of the ramifications of this, a concrete example, I have an NR zone here. This is an old development where trees were saved, and as you can see, these circles represent the trees, big old exceptional trees. And we have a lot here that is in the neighborhood residential zone. And under the old standard, it's minimum lot coverage. So assuming this is over 5,000 square feet, they've covered the lot with 30, gotten their 35%, and then they have to save the trees for that. And this promotes a creative design, because if you're told that you must save the trees, as long as you can get your maximum lot coverage, you're forced by the code to design a project that saves the trees with the maximum lot coverage. Under the new code, all they have to do is say, well, you know what, it's necessary for me to put the driveway right here. And in fact, I need a little pedestrian path between this ADU and this DADU, and they can remove the trees just because it's necessary. Also, just to add, this is under the old ordinance. Now, with this new, I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but with new HB 1110, which is a state law that was passed in August, I think it was August of 2023, no, May of 2023, they have to have 4 units at a minimum on this lot. And in fact, if it's near a transit station or there's other criteria, it could be up to 6 units. So again, when you're trying to fit 6 units and on a single family lot, it's going to be necessary now to remove those 2 trees as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I think you're drawing a conclusion that is not necessarily the case. I mean, it's true, perhaps if you read the stark letters, but you're asserting that if they're going to build a walkway between those 2 buildings you just mentioned, that they're going to cut that tree down. There would be no effort to go around it. And I'm just not sure that you can make that affirmative statement. It's possible, but you're also assuming that the city staff is not going to look at this and say, you don't need to cut that tree down to get around this, and we prefer you do this. I mean, is there none of that conversation that goes on, or you're asserting that no matter what happens, they can just assert, we're going to cut the tree down, we want to make it straight, we're not going to make it round, and there's no ability on the staff part to change that?
So the city, I'm sorry.
Is that correct?
No, the city, no, what I am looking at is what the ordinance allows a developer to do by law. And the city is required to allow a developer to do what the ordinance allows them to do. The city can't force them to save a tree when the law literally allows them to remove it. There's no discretion for the city to say, save that tree. And for purposes of this hearing, it's critical to look at this from the perspective of what the regulation allows developers to do, and not consider that maybe developers will be more generous and keep trees just because they want to be, they think it's a good idea. It's critical to look at this from what the regulation allows, because that's the question of whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. Does that? Yeah. Okay. So then going back to, I'm going to go into now we're getting into the low-rise zone. And I want to point out the differences between the old code. We have the old code says tree protection on sites undergoing development in low-rise zones. If the director determines, that's not it, it's number 2 here. The director may permit an exceptional tree to be removed if the total floor area that could be achieved within the maximum permitted FAR and height limits cannot be achieved. So that's a mouthful, but basically it's saying if it's kind of like, the maximum lot coverage is the standard for, you have to be able to get your maximum lot coverage to be able to keep trees, or I'm sorry, you can't remove trees if you can get your maximum lot coverage. For the low-rise zone, you cannot remove trees if you can get your maximum FAR. The new code is different. It's in low-rise, mid-rise, commercial, and Seattle mixed zones. Trees may be removed if an allowable development area of 85%, so that's a footprint, 85% of the entire site cannot be achieved without extending into the tree protection area. Now I'm not sure how familiar the board is with FAR. I think it's kind of a confusing concept, but FAR is about the volume of the building, the floor area ratio. It measures the total building area as a proportion to the lot size. And so if you have, say, zoning, you have a 5,000 square foot lot, and the FAR, which is true in the low-rise one for townhomes, is 1.3, you can build 6,500 square feet of FAR. And the way because there's 3 stories can be built in that zone, you can fit that in with story 1, story 2, and story 3. So you can have a smaller, to get an FAR floor area ratio, you can build a taller building. It's about the floor area. It's not about the footprint on the site, it's a floor area. So when you're protecting trees, basically, simply put, you can build a tall building and have a smaller footprint and get what you're building you need to get on your site and still protect the tree. And under the old code, you had to go through design review, and they would come up with creative solutions to try to get people so they can get their floor area ratio, but still save the tree. There was a lot of effort and public process that went into it. Now, under this new code, and by the way, I just want to mention that if you do the math on a 5,000 square foot lot in LR1, you have a 43% coverage of the lot if you have a 3-story building at the maximum FAR. So that's 43% footprint. Now we have an 85% footprint that they're allowed to build. And this is critical right here. This is how you do it. This is the process you go through. You don't consider the design of the project at all. You just calculate the basic, you find the trees on the lot and you calculate what that area is. And you can't modify it, so you take up the whole spot. You subtract that from the area. There's let's say here, let's look at an example here. I'm sorry, this is getting confusing without a picture. So here's an LR2. This is an old project where this tree was saved because in an LR, I don't know what, I think this is an LR1 zone actually. And they did a creative solution to save this tree. Under the new code, what you do is you calculate, you don't even have a design proposed. You just go on this empty site, calculate, look at this right here, and then if this is less than 15 feet right here, you can subtract this area as well, because you can't build in that 15 feet. And then you subtract it from the total land area. Oops, I just closed it. And then once the
Ms. Newman, by the way, it looks like you have about 5 minutes left, just so for your timing purposes.
Good Lord. Then you subtract the basic tree protection area, and if that number is less than 85%, you can remove the trees. You don't even have to show a design. So it's a footprint calculation. So long story short, under the new code, many more trees will be removed by this ordinance. I am not going to take the time because I only have 5 minutes, but I just want to point out that the new code says for mid-rise commercial and Seattle mixed zones, the old code had the FAR requirement that I just explained. The new code allows 100% lot coverage in mid-rise commercial and Seattle mixed zones, which speaks for itself. You can remove all your trees. These sections obviously do not implement those comprehensive plan policies that I read, and they conflict with the policies and preclude the city from achieving its tree preservation goals. You know, they may have other programs and the like, but this is basically opening the door for removing mature trees on sites on practically every development in these zones I've discussed, and undermining their efforts to achieve their tree preservation goals and interfering with the goals of the comp plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mitchell, first of all, I'm sorry, board members, do you have any particular questions before we move to Mr. Mitchell?
Well, I one of the arguments I kind of wanted to hear about, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so Ms. Newman, I'm wondering if you could summarize quickly for us your public participation argument. I'm obviously we've read it, but
I'm happy
any
to see that.
points?
Yeah, it's a
in a way that we don't want to disadvantage your opponent by giving you more time here, but if you could quickly, if there's any points that you'd like to emphasize.
I can very quickly summarize that. It's very simple. I'm not objecting to the entire process. Obviously, there was an enormous amount of public input through the process. The enormous amount of input resulted in a draft ordinance that we actually defended against the building industry in a DNS appeal. So we were supportive of that ordinance. And then the mayor's office introduced a new bill really at the 11th hour. And the problem is that it was this rushed process that was, there's no explanation for why they rushed through it so quickly. That was done in a way that the folks who were advocating in favor of tree protection and the UFC, which has an obligation and duty under the code to provide recommendations on specific legislative proposals before they go to the committee, did not have an opportunity to review this new rushed version that was aligned with the building industry recommendations.
So is that to say then that you're not taking issue with the fact that there was a 3-week, or maybe you could explain how your view of this through the 3-week comment period after that? Because there's the modification of the version, but then there's still a 3-week window where public comment was apparently accepted and received and considered in some way, it seems. Can you address that in some way?
Yes. If you look at Dan Strauss's email to the city, so keep in mind that the land use committee was basically the committee that kind of had the authority and power to really make decisions on what should be adopted. And our focus is what the land use committee approved and the lack of process before they approved it. And once that was approved, the city council, there was an email from Dan Strauss, I don't have it in front of me and I don't want to misquote it, but I just want to highlight that there was basically a don't make any changes to this, we're not going to be accepting amendments to the city council, the full city council. And so comments that were provided by the public after that land use committee approval, which didn't have enough time and review, before the city council considered it, just wasn't given the same weight or focus.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions at this point?
I don't. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, you'll have 40 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.